I'm gonna start talking with my hands in chats.
Yeah, there you go.
One of them is.
Hey, what's happening, everybody? My name is Chad.
And I'm Maple.
And I'm Dwafi.
And today we are going to be talking about the equal... No, we're not. Today we are going to be talking about Avatar versus Surrogates. The stare down. All right, so who wants to tell me about what happens in Avatar?
Basically, a group from the US military force in another planet called Pandora. They basically go there because they need a mineral called unobtainium that is also being used to produce their energy. But their little issue is that there is a native civilization there called the Na'vi. So they cannot obtain the unobtainium. They ask for Jake to help them by using an avatar.
Yes.
Okay, this avatar was actually supposed to be for Jake's twin brother, but he has died. And he is the only one that has the DNA connections similar to his twin brother, so he can actually use this avatar. And that's where everything starts, mainly because in the end, Jake is not going to help the US military force to obtain the unobtainium, but actually he's going to protect the Na'vis from the US military force. It's really interesting how it ends up developing, in my opinion.
No, I think you nailed it. That's exactly it. That's the premise.
Yep.
Basically.
Surrogates, essentially, we're stepping into a society of people who are living out their day-to-day lives in android bodies. There's a lot around that using a surrogate is safe. Nothing bad can happen to you. And then there's this weapon that they need to figure out what's going on with, because you're not supposed to be able to have anything bad happen to you, but people are dying via their surrogates because of this weapon. And then we find a civilization of humans, which are just people that aren't using surrogates, that are against it. We find them. Tom ends up getting to where Lionel is, and Tom then takes over, makes the final decision to just shut it all down.
Yeah.
So
okay, great. The qualifier. Okay, guys. So how close of twins do we think they are?
Oh God, here it comes. I have this,
notes.
and this, and this.
Rip into it, Daffy.
Let's say that I consider them cousins, but like adopted cousins. Basically, according to Wikipedia, they are twin movies because both of them use what would be either a synthetic or organic body to be controlled by a neural connection. But other than that, I mean, I came up with some ideas, but they're crazy. Okay, get ready, chat, get ready, you get ready, because I don't find them very close. I don't find them twin-like. What about you, Maple?
I would have to agree that I feel like the baseline concept, but the plots are not even.
No, they're not.
They're fighting for two completely different things. The love entanglements are entirely different reasons.
Exactly. The reasons why they use it are different as well.
The civilizations, one could be more realistic than the other. One's on an entirely other planet somewhere else with a whole different civilization.
We don't even know exactly. We don't even know where, but we know it's called Pandora.
Yeah. And then at least in Surrogates, it's still on Earth. I always talk with my hands like they just come up like
I know, don't worry, I do that a lot, but I hold my knees for
I'm gonna start talking with my hands in chats.
Yeah, there you go.
One of them is but I would have to agree that I would have to reach to find more deeper relations between the movies, but I think baseline, I can understand why they would be labeled as twin movies, because the avatars and there being two opposing teams against each other. Yeah. I think I could subscribe to that, but otherwise, I just feel like
that's part of where my my in deep to try to find where's the twin like thing. One of them has to do with what you just mentioned, which is the fact that there are two sides fighting, and even though they fight apparently for different reasons, the rebels from Surrogates want to preserve the nature and natural evolution of humanity, while the Na'vi at the same time want to preserve their nature and what would be their ecosystem, which in the end we could also say it as the natural evolution somehow.
Yeah.
I could not agree more. You took the words out. That's what I was going to say. Yeah. I think that's the other thing, is that there's kind of a nature versus technology versus industrialization thing going on. The Na'vi kind of represent the culture that is connected to the earth and to Gaia, and they're very spiritual, and the culture that is about imperialism and consuming and ripping everything away and stripping people of their own humanity, even via the Avatar program, is the counterpoint. And so in Surrogates, it had a more simply done, more cheesy way of accomplishing the same kind of idea, but it does get into the idea of like, surrogates bad, people need to see the sun, and nature good, surrogates bad.
Yeah. Be outside.
Yeah. But it's curious that in Surrogates, the rebels are not the good guys either. As per what would be Avatar, the Na'vis are what would be the good side. So in a way, I feel kind of bad to have to compare the rebels with the Na'vis. But as you well said, it's one of those things that if you go deeper into trying to understand and compare these two movies, you could relate these concepts of preserving natural evolution and nature itself. It is in there. It's just that it's for different means, if you could say it like that.
Yeah. The phrase that comes to my mind is loosely related. That's it.
Round 3, fight.
I would say Surrogates, even though it's cheesy, and it just is, it is what it is. It's not very entertaining, but for me, in my brain, I think Surrogates did a better job with the concept of the androids and neurolinking, because to me, to be from one human form into a similar human form, that in my brain makes more sense than me being adjusted into a compatible avatar that's only compatible with me because I have DNA linking me to it. So it's not as accessible, to everyone in that sense, whereas like anyone on Earth in Surrogates can have their own little avatar. So I kind of like that better, because if I were to put myself, not that I want to be in either of these movies, but if I were to put myself in that situation, then it's like, oh, okay, like I could see this being more realistic. Surrogates hits more on that for me than Avatar, than me imagining myself going to Pandora and doing God knows what as a giant blue.
Exactly,
Na'vi.
because first of all, you would have to be from the military, first of all, to even have the possibility to enter in an avatar.
Yeah, so, which it's like this exclusive thing in Avatar, whereas in Surrogates, it's accessible and they're making it's for everybody, and it's more of a human thing.
Do you feel like that's a problem, though, that it's more limited? I feel like that's almost one of the things that makes it feel more realistic, is that it's kind of the early phases of something, so it's not super popular, and it's not consumer, because in Surrogates, like you said, to me, it's almost a bigger leap to think that everyone would be doing it, rather than it would be, like, they only created the program so they could infiltrate the Na'vi.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a, roller coaster idea.
True. Well,
yeah.
Damn.
Well, but technically they used the species from the Na'vi to create Na'vi avatars, but you can perfectly imply inside the movie that you're doing other avatars for other planets that they're imperializing, to put it that way.
Oh, they are. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
I'm going to get into
that. It would be safe to assume that you can actually create other avatars. It's just that they incubate according to the DNA of each species that exists in the specific planet that you go to. This time it was Pandora, so this time we saw the Na'vis.
Right.
Yeah. That was basically it.
I think I just made the assumption that this was kind of a new technology, because everyone still acts kind of so in awe about it. And he seems like the first person who's been very successful at like penetrating into the culture. So if this was kind of their go-to,
no, it's clear that it cost the investment to create an avatar, regardless of the species that would become.
Right.
It had a huge cost, which kind of implies what you say, that obviously this was more or less something that was still under development or recently developed. But it wasn't the reason why it was limited had nothing to do with the DNA of what you're trying to incubate, but I think it had to do with the technology itself.
Oh, yeah.
To be able to generate from a DNA to reproduce what would be an entire body of regardless what species. I think that's where was the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're not really making a Na'vi, you're making this weird homunculus. which I actually really liked about Avatar.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with that.
I like that they all call them demons because that's what they are. It's like they know, like when Neytiri sees Jake Sully, she wants to kill him at first, and it's like because that's all you can do with Imperialists.
They call it fake as well. They also call it it's a toy or a doll or something like that. When Jake first fell and got disconnected from its own body.
Right. Yeah, when he's trying to make his confession as to what's going on and they cut him off.
Exactly.
Yeah. I go back and forth in this section a lot as to which handles the core concept better because, and it sucks because the movies to me are a little bit different. But the ability at the end of Avatar to be able to completely sync your consciousness to the body in which he was in, that makes it different too. That does make a difference. Yeah. Because I don't know that it really pointed to the fact that you'd be able to do that in Surrogates. I don't think so.
No, not at all. Because Surrogates are pure metal. They're just a metallic structure that they put a synthetic skin and then the clothes on and all that, just making it look beautiful.
Right, and, peeling the faces off to do like makeup.
Because we can see that, for example, in the scene where Agent Greers and his wife are talking in the kitchen, he is the human, he is himself, but his wife is instead a surrogate. She doesn't want to get out from her room. She doesn't want to do any sort of activity. It is true that in her case, there's a special reason why she's not doing that. But I can also assure that most humans from Surrogate, from the movie, do exactly the same. They don't use their body anymore, which implies that in the future this will generate, health problems and body problems, physical problems in general. Your bones are going to atrophy, your muscle is going to have issues and going to degenerate. And I was a little bit shocked when they presented children as like kid surrogates. I was like, oh my God, they're not even going to grow up.
I also have a one-liner. There were just some cheesy lines coming from surrogates. And he's like, I think it's Bruce Willis. He's like, honey, I don't know what you are. For all I know, you could be some fat STEM dude in a chair with his dick hanging out. And it's just like, you just don't know. But it's true. It's true. You have all of these people. You could be anyone on the other side of that.
That's just one of the concepts I actually thought that they handled, or one of the conceptuals they handled poorly in that movie, is that is obvious that I think the vast majority of people would not look like how they look. And so the fact that 90% of people in the movie present how they actually look, to me screams we didn't want to spend the money. Because like I wouldn't even look like a person. I would look crazy. Yeah. I'd be looking like a weird demon Batman or something like that.
We would be like cyberpunk.
Yeah, exactly. Right. 100%. I'm glad you brought up cyberpunk because I think the movie fails to actually accomplish the cyberpunk aesthetic for what the story obviously wants to be.
Well, and Bruce... I wrote a note and I said, Bruce Willis is just Bruce Willis, but older. And the drones are ruining his marriage.
Absolutely.
That's the plot summary. To me, that's what I got out of it.
I was wondering at first if one of the reasons why his marriage wasn't working out was because they were aging and she didn't want to see him in his aged version because she wouldn't feel attracted, and she was afraid to not show herself either because maybe he would not feel attracted. I thought initially that could be one of the things that would make her stay inside that room all the time locked.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it is an argument for them later on. Like, I'm not that smiling girl anymore because he's talking to her, know. They're like zapping themselves in the neck and the leg with something. I don't know.
Well, that to me was like cheesy. Okay, so how would you do drugs if you were a surrogate? Well, what if you zap yourself?
That part.
Goofy.
Yeah, I know.
So
right?
goofy. Yeah.
And then they're like arguing in the hallway, and it's like I think you are right in some way that she doesn't want to she just doesn't want to show herself, or she doesn't feel good. I also love that the universe hates them so much that when he's in the hospital, it shows them a commercial about children being safe. When he's being let go from his job and he's on his deathbed and his kid's dead.
And I also remember I was questioning myself, if you end up liking somebody in Surrogates, you like the surrogate. You don't like the actual person because you don't know who's behind it. So what do? Do they go and take an apartment and they only live as surrogates inside of it and you never actually see your true self? Or do they actually meet up?
Oh, when you get married? That's a good question.
Yeah, like, are you just going to be surrogate surrogate forever? Or are you ever going to bring your body?
And you're going to buy another surrogate as a child and tell a kid or tell some guy, hey, listen, who wants to be my kid?
That's so funny. I know. It's like, yeah, there's so many things within surrogates, I guess, that could go wrong.
Exactly, yeah. Well, one of the examples that I wanted to give is that you may think that when surrogates appear, or at least that's my what I'm going to say is my personal opinion here, you may believe that some people will still going to do active work. What would it be? To go to the gym or do some running, jogging, anything. Mm-hmm. You know, that some people would be active and some people would just prefer, because they're more introverts, for example, they would just prefer to go with a surrogate. They feel more comfortable. And instead of having the rebels as active people who want, you know, to preserve their body and make it look as best as possible, or simply be themselves.
Yeah,
they've shown them like they were the bad people, mm-hmm. like they were the poorest ones, and that they were a little bit woohoo, you know?
yeah.
And it felt kind of bad. It felt bad to see that absolutely nobody would prefer to be in their skin.
Yeah,
I actually
truly in their skin.
I agree with you on that. I think it clashes in the theme that they're trying to present.
Right.
They want you to feel like it's a bad thing that people are in. I'm going to be honest. I think the movie kind of has a little bit of a boomer take. It felt very like, kids just want to play video games all day. You need to go outside and see the sun. But if that's your theme, then fine. That's your theme. But then I agree with you. It feels like they kind of contradict their own theme that they've set up by making the rebels seem so undesirable.
Yeah.
That was the word that I was looking for. Undesirable.
Yeah, they all seem like a bunch of kind of hicks that are, you know, and then they're being manipulated anyway. Their leader is like, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Their leader is a surrogate.
Right.
I know. And they try to like make that be like this extreme plot twist when it is almost like the way they present it in the movie. I was just like,
well, the movie is so unbelievably uncreative and unoriginal that everything that happens, you can kind of guess because you're like, well, what would a first-year college student write? So as soon as they establish surrogates and they try to fake you out with Bruce Willis and make you realize, oh, he was a surrogate, you know that's going to come back as a plot thing at some point. Yeah. Someone we're going to think is a surrogate who's not, and someone is going to be very different than their surrogate. So the rebel leader ends up being that guy who's the guy who ends up, we realize was a surrogate, and we think you're supposed to think they're not. So when that stuff happens, you're like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
There
also,
it is.
Too, one of the things I want to point out as well that kind of just was a little too much for me is that how much superhuman strength the surrogates have by the time they're actually fighting or in the middle of combating anything. It's like you get your arm ripped off, and they really just let you know like how indestructible these things are. So it's funny that all it took was him pushing a button at the end for them to all collapse down to nothing.
Yeah, I just thought that scene was just handled so badly. Like, first off, okay, James Cromwell is the guy who created all the surrogates, right? And he regrets it. He wishes that people would go touch grass. Okay, fine. But his stupid plan is that I have a 2-part self-destruct system, and the first part kills everybody using a surrogate, and the second part just destroys the surrogates. Then just destroy the surrogates.
Yes, like he literally could have just pressed the button the whole time. Like,
why did he want to kill everyone? That doesn't make any sense.
I know.
So the reason,
according to the movie, it was for cleansing.
I guess.
What are you gonna cleanse if they're dead?
I know he wouldn't say it. So then what you end up with is I'm thinking like, what were the writers thinking, right? And the writers were thinking, we need Bruce Willis to seem like the hero who like did the thing. So he stops the killing part. Great. Then it's like, oh, by the way, there's a second. Why aren't they connected either? That should have just been the same thing. Why is that not one button press for both? But no, now there's a second one, and you have to decide if you want everyone to be in surrogates or not. And he's like, no, I'll make them go outside. And I understand some of the concerns of people being lazy. But on the other hand, it's also like it's people's prerogative to be lazy. And on the secondary part, how many people were in a surrogate that were like flying an airplane with 80 people or 100 people in the plane?
Thank you. Or working in a nuclear center, or having a surgery at the hospital. anything.
Hospital's probably the worst one, because I would almost guarantee in that universe that the vast majority of hospital workers are surrogates, because then you don't have to worry about like contamination and infection and germs.
But the one that they do surgery on are actual humans.
They're all going to be humans, because you don't do surgery on surrogates. So like the hospital would have been the worst example. It would have been a nightmare. Or what about people who are like invalids and like paraplegics who are like, well, I don't have a life outside of, like, my surrogate has given me a second chance at life.
Yeah. My surrogate brings me food.
Yeah. Or like,
I eat thanks to my surrogate.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, because I live alone. Or it's like, I never thought, my doctor said I'd never walk again. And now like I go mountain climbing all the time as a surrogate. It saved my life. It's wonderful. And this guy is like his boomer take of just like, no.
Yeah. The thing is, the movie implies that initially that was supposed to be the purpose of a surrogate, to help the invalid.
Which I agree with you that, and Maple, that maybe in 50 years time in Avatar, that's what eventually that would turn into as well.
Yeah.
It would probably become cheaper. It would probably become easier. And so Jake just shows up. He wasn't even supposed to be the guy to do it. And so he's the one who actually has the ability to completely transform into a Na'vi, which that connects to the idea of like, it is Pocahontas, it's Ferngully, it's Dances with Wolves. It's always this like, hey, I'm a white guy and I'm hanging out with, Last Samurai. I'm hanging out with these other white guys who are bad and they want to come and colonize you. But I'm going to realize that the noble savages are really wonderful and I'm going to be like them. I think what's different with this one is that the Jake character being such a clean slate, like you said earlier, he doesn't only become an Avatar state and hang out with them. He literally completely is reborn. Like the Jake version dies and he becomes completely a Na'vi. And I think that's
because the Sigourney's character did die with Gaia. She didn't make it to the other body.
Yeah, so she's in the tree, and which I think are some cool themes that they actually play with and kind of work with there. I like the idea of showing, we're talking about the competing, societies. I think the surrogates one is just, my biggest issue is it's so plain and simple. It's basic.
It's disconnected. It disconnects itself by the end. Because, to just shut it all down, right?
Oh, you mean that part? Okay,
yeah,
sure.
It just is,
it's solved.
Literally, it's solved. It's just disconnected. There's nothing more to that. Whereas, like, this is, like, more of an integration. Like, Avatar does a better job of, now it's an integrated thing. And like you said, he really does become one of them, where now... But in surrogates, it's just, okay, it's done.
I wonder if the U.S. military who developed the avatars would be capable to fully integrate us, or it was just this tree in particular that could do that integration. I always had that question, though. I don't know how much the technology that the U.S. military proves in the movie is actually capable to fully put you inside the avatar body, which... First question, why would you do that? You're a human. Your only intention is to study the species and all that. Why would you need that? True. But what if? What if?
Well, it would be cool, but I like that I like that at that point they can't, because I think that makes the theme work, which is the idea that like Sigourney Weaver couldn't have done that because, like I said, she has too much of the, like there would be resistance at every point. It would be like, hey, you see life like this, but another good example. When they grab him at first and Neytiri is like, no, don't kill him. They're like, well, let's hold on to him for a while and see if he can be cured of his insanity. I love that they describe the normal way that humans think as insane, because it's like, of course it's insane. Like he says, we burned out the entire planet we live on. They completely have coexisted on this beautiful, wonderful planet. And so to see us as people who like literally burn them to the ground and then take over the next one and burn it to the ground. What's going to happen if we got the unobtainium here and then we ran out? We would just go to the next place.
It's just going to be exactly. It's just going to be the same thing. This movie was very clear in terms of what do they defend. They were not contradicting themselves, unlike surrogates did with their intention in proving that surrogates bad, humans good. Well, they kind of contradicted themselves unwillingly.
Yeah.
But in Avatar, on the other hand, it's all about anti-war, be green, be natural, and love nature.
Right.
And I think they've done a great job in clearing that part out. I think they've done it magnificent. There was no contradiction in it.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I would say Avatar totally wins in this aspect over surrogates.
Yeah, I agree.
The only issues I have with Avatar is how aggressively mediocre I think a lot of the plotting is itself. I think some of the themes are better than the plot and what happens in the movie.
Yeah. Yes. And that's where, because I'm thinking, I agree with you, Chad. I think of it from perspective of themes. Adafi, I feel like you have a good point with it doesn't, one movie kind of contradicts itself versus the other. At least sticks to the core concept that it just followed through on Avatar.
Yeah, one of the contradictions in Surrogates is the idea that like it's supposed to be, ultimately the message of the movie is that surrogates bad, real life, body good. But then they paint the rebels to look like a bunch of assholes.
Yeah.
So it would be like if they did the same thing for the Na'vi.
It's just everything's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, nature's good, the military's bad, but also the Na'vi are a bunch of assholes. So it's like, well, then what's the... What are you saying
like,
here?
What are we saying? Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So it kind of only leaves room for only one guy got it. Only one man was the one who was good. It's like, and it's Bruce Willis.
And that was Bruce Willis. Exactly.
Right. And it almost feels like it's him wanting to do it, like, hey, as long as I seem really cool and everyone else seems dumb.
Yeah.
The other issue there I have with that one is that in Surrogates, it's got this another boomer thing I didn't like was the whole, like, his character's representation of that theme comes in the form of like, oh no, your surrogate got messed up. You know what? I don't need a surrogate. This needs a man. Like a real man's going to come do it. And the whole rest of the movie is just like, nope, I still got it. I don't care if they're a bunch of, robot people. I'm, a man is all you need. It's like, I spit and I chew tobacco and I have sex. It's very like Demolition Man, if you guys
Macho Man. I don't know what Demolition Man is, but I get what you're saying.
It's that idea, but like it's kind of a joke, and that's what I was reminding me of in Surrogates. Now, having said that, it works on the point that you kind of need him to be vulnerable. So if he was a surrogate the whole time, you don't care what happens to him because he's just a robot. So that part works with needing him to be someone who could get injured or die.
Right.
But like I said, just the attitude is kind of where it all came across so cheesy to me. It's like what my dad would say.
Yeah.
I didn't interpret him as someone vulnerable. I interpreted that his character was somebody who didn't want to use a surrogate, but due to social pressure, he was kind of forced to, and he wanted to have a more what was supposed to be from the very beginning, like, we're gonna use the surrogates at certain moments, but then I'm gonna be myself during the rest of the day.
Right.
That more human side.
Exactly, but he was so pressured by society that he could not do that, while the other option would have been the rebels, which, as you said, they were undesirable. They were living in very poor conditions. They were not making it. They were not convincing anybody either. So he was kind of like that spot. And I do have to admit that I did like that little message, the way I understood it. I did like that message because he was most surely not the only person who felt that pressure.
Right.
And if you are an introvert and you already know that people are going to judge you for trying to be human every once in a while, you're just going to close yourself in more. So the concept of having psychological issues becoming more of a thing in this world, and you try to hide everything inside a robot. I kind of liked that part. I do admit it. But the issue of this movie is what we have been saying throughout all this time. It was very poorly developed to make it great. I think the idea was good, but it wasn't developed enough. And the time itself, the movie itself, it has a very short length, like 1 hour, and doesn't even get to 1 hour and a half.
Yeah.
They kind of rushed everything, which was the other part that I think they couldn't make the plot better. But honestly, I do think that the idea was pretty okay. I agree with Maple when she said that they are more realistic in this aspect than Avatar itself.
And I just remembered something because of what you're saying when I was watching the movie, because I had already seen Avatar when it had come out. I never saw Surrogates. So when I was watching this and I realized, there is an opposite, rebel civilization of people not using surrogates, I was hoping that when we entered that society, instead of them being shown as poor and just not thriving, how cool would it have been if they created this thriving like, what are those?
Well, like Utopia kind of.
Yeah, like a Utopia area where
they're all gardening and they wear shawls.
Yeah, like white linen, and they're having the best time ever.
Someone's playing a sitar in the back.
And they're accepting the imperfections and stuff like that.
Like a fun hippie society.
Yeah.
Like, we are communing together.
I was expecting that as well when they had areas for themselves. I thought those areas were going to be, as Maple says,
But also, Dafi, I like the idea you're saying as well of like the social pressure. I think that's a thing that you could also make as another comparison between the two movies. Jake is having to struggle with basically realizing that the team I'm on that I should be loyal to because it's my species,
right,
is doing the wrong thing. And I basically have to become a terrorist and like a race traitor and switch over to the other guys and help them against my people. So, I mean, again, talking about immense social pressure.
And exposing. And,
exactly.
he has to do it where he knows he'll be exposed for it.
Right.
Like he's not going to be able to do it quietly.
Yeah.
They will know, and
it was
for
him.
sure that it is him.
I just wanted to add that as well, not only the pressure of the military that he received, as you well explained, but also he was kind of manipulated by reminding him constantly, new legs.
Oh,
new
yeah.
legs.
I know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
The amount, going back and watching it again, the amount of times that is hammered in is almost uncomfortable.
You don't do the job right. No legs.
But that's what I like about it. That's imperialism. You know? It's just
yeah.
It's soulless. It doesn't care about him. It doesn't care about the Na'vi. Giovanni Ribisi, who's the guy who's in charge of kind of running this whole operation. It's like, what do we catch him doing? He's over there playing golf. You know, he's working on his putt game while he's on like the most beautiful planet of all time. He just wants to hang out in his little bridge and play his putt game. But even he's got that attitude where he's like, well, is there like a way that we could like maybe, you know, reduce the casualties and like, you know, because he's just worried about the PR and how it's going to look. Like the machine does not care, you know, for sanctity of life, you know, or the environment or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so Jake is another one of those. Like he's just another victim kind of built into this machine. That's all still theme stuff. Like I said, the problem is then you sit and watch the movie and it's just like the most basic, obvious stuff that you've seen 100 times in Dances with Wolves. The other thing I can't stand is how predictable a lot of it is. Like every time they do this little thing where Neytiri's talking to Jake and she's like, oh, you know, we fly these pterodactyl things, and that's the really big, crazy one. No one flies those except our greatest warriors. You're
I know,
like,
and then they're like,
"Oh."
you are a king!
You set your watch. You're like, okay, it's a half an hour before he's riding one of those. Like, of course.
Yeah, and then
she gets the panther one that nobody rides either. Like, you're just like, yep, of course. Okay,
of course.
I get it. So I think that was the problem. Was like when I walked out of the movie the first time, that was my initial thought, was just how basic and kind of obvious everything plot wise was.
I agree. I think there's only so many ways you can write this movie.
Pocahontas.
This type of movie. There are only, and even an Android movie, an Avatar movie, there are only so many ways that you can write this movie, and it's been written so many times.
Yeah, I would say though that one thing that is kind of nice that it's a little different between the two is that Surrogates went with the obvious thing of like, well, if what's special about our movie is it's about avatars or surrogates, then we need to have the theme of the movie be about, are you pro or anti surrogates? And Avatar doesn't super play that game. The Avatar is really just a thing to allow for Jake to connect to the other group. And the question is a lot less about, are avatars good or avatars bad? I guess it kind of starts with the idea that avatars were bad, but Jake is the kind of person who figured out how to use one for good because he got to, you know, get connected. But initially, the point of the avatars is that they're basically weaponized diplomacy.
Yeah.
That is for creating spies, you know.
The concept and the plot idea from each movie was totally different, which makes them in the end conclude that they're not so much twin films. And in terms of plot, they have nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
But in theme,
then if we go into these details,
yeah,
exactly. It's everything that we have elaborated up until now. We could actually see some sort of plausible comparisons between the two. But as I said at the beginning, I feel that we have to really brainstorm each movie in order to actually see where could they be twin-like.
Right.
But again, that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, like if these were to be written at the same time, right, and you say, here's the theme, now both of these parties go off and write a plot. It's like they took the themes, but they just did plots differently.
We basically explained everything that could be explained about Surrogates, and I think the conclusion this time is pretty clear for all three of us. That Surrogates has a great idea, but a poorly developed plot, which didn't actually help neither to empathize with the characters, nor to fully understand everything that is happening. So maybe a second rewatch and just being with your friends there and saying, oh yeah, see, this part doesn't make sense, and just just laugh and, you know, have a little bit of fun with it, maybe that would be cool. But watching it by yourself, and especially if it's a first time like Maple and I had, you were asking yourself if you are the one who's not paying attention to the movie, or is in fact the movie like that.
Yes, that is a perfect way to explain it. I just kept sitting there thinking, I was like, oh my god, in one ear and out the other. I was retaining. It was hard watching it alone, but there were points where I was like, if I was watching this with someone and I could have been cracking jokes at the movie through it, then I think I would have been able to make it through a little bit more easier, just because it was so cheesy, and like they have the one-liners, and like Chad mentioned, Surrogates has just the writing is very first year of college, just simple, punny. Yeah.
If I was like teaching a writing class, I would give the person an A for just having like done the thing. It's like you did all the things you're supposed to do. You got the parts, because the movie is a neo-noir, and that's why I like that you brought up, you know, cyberpunk earlier. This movie should have felt like Blade Runner, but it's not visually interesting to look at like Blade Runner. It's a very like almost shot like a sitcom. It's like overly lit. Everything is so just non-dramatic, especially in the daytime shots. Then the movie's supposed to be, okay, well, let's have these big action scenes, but all the action scenes are so boring. Just so like, I don't care. And then there's the mystery, which I think is the biggest I don't care. That was the thing. I just never found myself being invested in like, oh, is it? Oh, what if it's so-and-so? Oh, I don't know. And then when you find out it's James Cromwell at the end, I almost felt like they were just cheating. It's like, oh, okay, I guess it was just...
like, no, duh.
It was the butler the whole time. Like, all right, like...
Yeah.
And instead of ending with everyone walking out and seeing the sun for the first time, like the island, it should have been everybody, like, you know, screaming in horror as all the airplanes are crashing and the buses are crashing. And
there
hospitals.
It's not as simple as all of them just falling down on the ground and people walking outside.
How do we feel about the entertainment value of Avatar?
It's beautiful.
Yes.
It's fun to look at. Mm-hmm. It's creative in terms of the animals. Like, we see it's so much stuff that it's like, you know, you just, I don't know, used your imagination. It felt like somebody used their imagination and put this world together. And even the avatars themselves, like, they look really cool. They're blue, and, you know, all the details on their skin and their face, like whatever it may be. I don't know. It's just visually, it's something you can track, and it's more, it just grabs you because your brain's not used to seeing it, right? Like the sitcom-y feel. But looking at something, I'm like, wow, I've never seen anything like that. Or like this tree of life and everything's blue and neon and there's dandelion things floating everywhere and this big bird thing and then they have the tails, and, you know, there's just so much stuff going on that, to me, in terms of something I'm looking at it and it's new, I like it. So I'd rather, yeah,
it's entertaining that it keeps your curiosity always up. And then I just want to say something, maybe not everybody will agree, but it's James Cameron. He usually knows how to take your curiosity towards the movie. He knows how to do that stuff. Yeah. Maybe, as you said, if you do a second rewatch and you look further into it, you may feel the possibility that the plot is kind of mediocre, compared to what is all the 3D work, all the layers, all the colors, all the style. They've put a lot of work into the effects, into the CGI, and maybe the plot was more average. Yeah. That if they wouldn't have had all that behind it, maybe some people say that maybe it wasn't going to be that big of a deal. But personally, when I first watched Avatar, which was when it was released on theaters, when it was aired, I loved it. But you guys don't know how much. I mean, I even cried with it. I was like, oh my god. Yeah. And I admit that I'm super excited with Avatar 2. I am personally excited to watch it. I don't know, you guys.
You're allowed. I'm not like, I don't.
It seems, but I think that is something to point out, is that people either really love this movie or they really hated it. But I do think that the visual effects and the ability to create such good FX through it is what really holds the attention through the movie, even if the plot maybe could have been. For me personally, this is the first movie where I was like, this is really long. It was just really long.
Maybe the reason why some people consider it average, it's because it has nothing new in it. As you've said, you made some comparisons about movies that I personally didn't watch, so I can't tell. But maybe there were other movies that are very similar alike with this one. So they didn't really brainstorm much on how to create something unique, but it works. It's a plot that it works.
Yes.
You understand perfectly what is going on.
Right. Yeah.
And if you are a child that you've never watched the movies, or you barely know anything and you don't know that this is actually very similar to a movie 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So for a kid, perhaps this movie is like, wow, you know, something amazing. Instead, for the father who has seen thousands of movies, he's going to be like, yeah, and this is going to happen here, and this is the next thing is going to be this, the next one is going to be that. But that's where I do consider people may say that it's average, but I don't consider the plot bad. I don't find it bad.
Yeah.
But again,
I agree with
my
that.
personal opinion.
Yeah, I could agree with that, and that's why I'm saying, to me, that's where the visuals of it all keeps me going with it, because at least the visuals are something that I haven't experienced before. The plot may be familiar, and even if it becomes predictable, at least I'm seeing something that is vibrant, it's beautiful, it's fun, everything looks really cool, and I just like that better. So
is Avatar the first Dances with Wolves Ferngully movie that you've seen?
No, because I watched Ferngully when I was little, and I used to love even like something like Pocahontas when I was younger. Disney absolutely. Pocahontas too.
Yeah.
So it is something so I think.
So it at least was like the third iteration of that.
Right.
And Duffy's right. Like that's what happened to me, is like by the time I saw it, it's like, I mean, yes, it's like Ferngully, Pocahontas, Dances with Wolves, The Last Samurai, to an extent parts of Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange also has the story of him going with these Tibetan monks and like finding them and learning how to do their thing and absorbing into their culture. And then he becomes the best version of them, like the hero.
He was supposed to be the best of us.
True.
Yeah.
So
I saw Pocahontas and the Doctor Strange ones, but no. My mind never compared them with Avatar at any moment.
Yeah.
Ferngully is absolutely Avatar. No.
Right. Yeah.
I have not seen
Dancing
message. With Wolves. Yeah, Ferngully is a cute movie. I used to like the movie when I was little.
I actually went to see it because my father was so excited to see this James Cameron movie. It was his birthday. And my mother and I said, let's go and watch it together at the theater. And I would have never expected that I would love it, you know, when I was a kid as well. So I think I'm totally agreeing with Maple that it's the nostalgia, perhaps, that you remember how excited you were when you first watched it. And I still kind of have, you know, that love feeling for it.
Yeah.
More or less. But it is true that after rewatching it, live with my members on Patreon, it is true that I did feel the fact that it was going a little bit too slow, just a little bit, and, you know, pushing details that, you know, if they weren't there, it was okay because the plot would still be as good, or as average, depending from which side you're looking at.
Yeah, I think there's a way to. We've said this, I think, with the Batman. There's a way to edit down some movies where it can still be a good movie for whatever topic it's covering, whether it's been covered before. There are ways to edit down a better version of a movie, and I think there could be a little bit just shaved off where it's still movie still does its thing. It's still a good looking movie, but we're not using so much time.
Verdict. So, Dafi, which one do you think handled the concept better?
Avatar.
Okay. Got one for concept on Avatar. Maple, what about you?
I'm also going to have to agree with Dafi. I'm going to go with Avatar.
It's kind of funny. I actually thought, Maple, you're going the other direction.
Well, and this is where these episodes get me, because until I get to fully talk about it with everybody and see like full opinions, sometimes you guys get me, man. Okay. You guys waver me, man. You pull me to the other side. Overall, the plot flows better.
Yes.
So then
that's basically why I said Avatar.
All right, so that's 2 for Avatar. I also pick Avatar, and it's more a little bit around the theme stuff. I think that, again, we're comparing their concepts, and some of that is Avatar usage, some of that is the themes. First off, I just think that the avatars were just mechanically handled poorly in Surrogates. I think that they needed either more budget or to move the budget around. But the Surrogates came across really cheesy to me. But then the other thing is that kind of the two groups that are clashing with each other. Like I said, I feel like it kind of fought its own theme, and it just kind of ended up with a little bit of boomer take. So I'm going to give the concept to Avatar.
Avatar. 3 for 3.
That's impressive.
Which one do you guys think was more entertaining to watch?
Avatar.
Okay.
Daffy.
It depends. I mean,
right. The Schadenfreude.
I mean, if I'm watching it with friends and we just want to have a good laugh, Surrogates.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. Oh, that is true.
If I watch it by myself and I just want to enjoy, it's Avatar. Well, let me rephrase that. Enjoy and not think a lot. Because if I get confused in a movie and I have to think and I figure out that it's not me, it's the movie.
Right.
I'm going to be like, what? I just wasted my time.
Oh, yeah. You know what? That's a fair point. The problem is I think about it for me is like, I feel like Avatar to me is boring to watch, but Surrogates isn't only boring. It's also kind of annoying. It's like frustrating. I felt irritated that I had to keep track of what was going on.
Yeah. And the fact that normally there are times where I have a hard time kind of remembering who cast is or who characters are, but for some reason with Surrogates specifically, I had the worst time remembering who the hell anybody is. I'm like, who are you and why can't I remember?
Like I said, it's pretty, but that doesn't work for 2.5 hours for me.
I just turn on my squirrel brain. I will squirrel brain my way through that movie. I love the visual effects. And I think that's the reason I pick it is because when I was younger, I was like, this is so cool to look at. I don't care what's going on. It's beautiful. So I think it's still the same way when I was watching it again this time.
Hey, fair enough.
I also think that I'm going to continue with Avatar.
I am too, and that's because, like I said, Avatar is a little bit boring, but Surrogates is actually kind of frustrating. And I'm like, I just don't care. So like, I have to keep track, or it's gonna get confusing. And like, now I'm mad that I have to pay attention to who is this guy and who is that guy and what is this. So that is a Twin Movies first. We got ourselves a clean sweep for Avatar. So yay, Avatar!
Avatar! Woo!
Which I don't think is much of a surprise. Avatar is a better movie than Surrogates.
I'm so sorry for laughing that much.
So, hey, Daffy, thank you so much for coming on the show. I had a blast talking with you.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Where can the people find you?
Well, they can find me on YouTube by the name of Daffy. That one is most surely already here tagged in your video. They can also find me live on Twitch. I chat with them from Monday to Thursday. And I also have a Discord account in which I also tend to chat with the community as much as I can. And then last but not least, I have Instagram and Twitter as some sort of media in which to keep updates and notifications and even stuff about my life sometimes. And I think I'm saying everything. Obviously, Patreon for those who want to watch the full-length reactions to every other content that I've made. But yeah, I think I've said everything.
Awesome.
Yay.
Thank you so much again for coming on.
Yeah,
had a great
really,
time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. And I really want to say this. I had such a swell time. I mean it.
Definitely hope to have you back on the show.
Yeah.
Whenever you want, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching, and bye.
Bye.
Bye.